I'm Jen Bosworth Ramirez.
And I'm Gina Polici.
We went to theater school together. We survived it, but we didn't quite understand it.
20 years later, we're digging deep, talking to our guests about their experiences and trying to make sense of it all.
We survived theater school, and you will too. Are we famous yet?
It went from 1 to 3, so I put it on 3. I don't even know what 3 does, but okay, I'll keep it on 3. That's for sure.
Yikes, the mania. Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry about all that.
That's not your fault. Apparently, I need to have it on 3. I don't even know what 1, 2, and 3 mean.
Yeah. Okay. Weird.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I've got a Iron Man.
What is that exactly?
That's a heart monitor that my new cardiologist wants me to wear for a week to make sure everything's fine. They used to.
Is it called a Halter?
Yeah, it used to be a whole situation. Now they just give you this stick-on thing, and then
it's like sending messages.
To my doctor, and
so
you
cool.
press a button if you feel anything, but I don't feel anything weird, thank God. So
you sleep with it on too,
and you can shower. The technology is crazy. So it used to be this whole halter, like you'd have to wear like a shirt with and now it's just a stick of Iron Man stick on. So
what a time
we live in. I love my new cardiologist. Love her.
Yay.
She's so awesome. It was the best appointment. Like I said, I think I told you. So it was like, she's so nice. She was not shaming about anything. She was like, this is a lot of genetics. And this is also, and you're doing everything in your power right now to take care of your heart. We're going to follow you. I think it was a one-off. But because your father had heart issues, we're going to follow you and we're going to keep you on certain medicines for a little while. But she wasn't hysterical. So like when I went in there, my blood pressure is always really high at the doctor's office.
You get white coat fever.
White coat hypertension. That's white coat hypertension. And so it was like really high. And the nurse was like, oh, she'll, and the people that, I told you about how this is a concierge service and you have to pay $600 just to get in. Did I tell you? Oh my God. It's very LA. It is the worst. So the thing about Los Angeles is it's crazy, but also, so my doctor in Chicago referred me to this doctor that he did his residency with, Dr. Weinberg. So I call, and another doctor. So I call the first doctor at Cedars-Sinai because I figure Cedars-Sinai, that's fancy. I'll go there. They have like a 9-month waiting list unless you're having a heart attack. And I was like, no. Then I called Dr. Weinberg's office. They're like, yeah, she is taking new patients, but have you ever heard of, we're a concierge service? And I'm like, what? What? What are you talking about? They're like, it's a club. So you pay, about this. Do you know about this from just, my gosh. So, and I never heard of anything like this. They're like, there's different levels. So you could pay. And I said, what's the lowest level I could pay and still see Dr. Weinberg, who I love? And they're like $600 a year. So it's not like,
a year.
Yeah,
okay,
it's not every time. It's not every time. So for $600 a year, you get in and you even just get an appointment with one of the doctors at the Pacific Heart Institute. And so I was like, fine. I can't be waiting 8 months. Fine. Well, let me tell you something. I mean, it's not always true. You pay for what you get for what you pay. But sometimes it is. Like, there was no waiting. There was no, everyone was so nice. There was like on time. She's just hysterical and funny. And like, but yeah, this concierge thing, I had never heard about it in my life.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because like what we need is universal health care. And it's ridiculous that we don't have it, but we don't have it. And so, so it's just like anything else. If you have money, you can have great healthcare.
It's so crazy. And it's so gross. And so a lot of my friends that I've told have been like, that's disgusting. And I'm like, listen, you guys, I'm kind of in a hard place here because I need my heart tested. And I also happen to have the $600. So like, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to stand on principle and not get my heart treated because our country is a racist, classist cesspool. I still need my heart to work, like.
And I was going to say, it's so important that you would find a cardiologist like this because they say that women, the reason that women die so frequently from heart attacks where there was no warning signs, supposedly, is because women are less likely to go to the doctor with any type of pain. And it's just always been so associated with men. Heart disease has been so associated with men. So the fact that she's making you feel good and she's great at her job is amazing.
I was like in love. She was like, "Can you come back every day?" I said, "I'm not paying $600 every time. I'll tell you that right now, Dr. Weinberg." But she laughed and she said, "I know it's a weird thing. She's from the East Coast. You know, they did their residency in Philly. So she's not a Southern California gal." And I felt so like, she was like, "You're not going to freak out whenever your blood pressure's high." She's like, "Blood pressure means at that moment in your arm, your pressure in your arm is high. Now, if we see X, Y, I don't," she just explained things. And then she took my blood pressure in each arm and it was normal again. So I was like,
yeah.
So it's just the hysteria, or like the fear, the straight up fear of like, oh my God, something's wrong and I'm gonna be in trouble for the thing being wrong, like it's my fault, was totally taken out. And also, nobody there's scared of heart things because that's all they do all day. So they're not like a GP that just doesn't know and is like, "Oh my God, your blood pressure is 160 over. You're going to have a stroke right in my office." She's like, nah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I feel that feels really good. It feels really weird to be in Southern California. I'll tell you that. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sort of like, where do I live? But I live here. I keep telling myself, you live here. You live here.
Yes.
This is your home.
Right.
And and I started putting up more art, and I feel better. So I'm doing all right. I just feel a little like, okay, I got to establish my life here again.
When you were driving there, did it feel like you were moving there all over again?
Yeah, it did. And it also felt like, what are we going to find there? Will people remember us? But everyone in my apartment, I love my apartment complex. It's hilarious and it's real weird. And everyone is really, I mean, it's nice, it's fine, but everyone is real odd, which I love. Like everyone is a character. There's, 6, in a 93, there's 93 units and like there's 7 French bulldogs, which I find hysterical. I know. And I want to get one. I know we're thinking of getting one named Doris, a girl, but Doris, the bulldog.
I love that.
I know.
Oh, that'd be so cute.
So anyway, I love being here. It's just getting reestablished of like, oh, right. This is right. Okay. Oh, yes.
And also you had a major life event happen while you were away. So that's the other thing. It's like you haven't ever been in LA with whatever it is that you're dealing with now. And you have to get used to whatever that means for being in your new context.
But I've lost 13 pounds since I've been in the hospital. So that's fantastic.
Amazing. Good for you.
Yeah. And I'm doing it solely for my heart. Like I'm doing it solely for health reasons, which is, look, it would be great to feel a little better self-esteem wise, but literally I'm like, okay, well, what can I do to make my organs feel better? Because that's why I'm here, so that I can live past 65 and 67, which is when my parents died. So,
all right.
Yeah. I don't want that. How old was your dad?
57.
Oh my God. Manada. That is so young.
So young. So young.
Miles is 54.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, and Miles has a much healthier lifestyle than Dennis Felici ever did. But, well, I'm glad. I'm glad that everything is okay.
Now let's talk about your blog. It's so good. It's so well written. And obviously you're a good writer, but it's really well written and it is so touching a chord with people. How does it feel?
Thank you for saying that. It feels great. And I was having this conversation with Erin last night. I said, I'm understanding something more deeply now about being a writer. And basically what it is that every word you write has to be true. Especially if it's a personal sort of story, every single word has to be true, and then also like ring true as you're reading it, as you're writing it. And if you're going to write, everybody writes personally these days. So everything is about people's take on things. And so the world is saturated with takes on things, which doesn't mean that one shouldn't write personally. It just means if you're going to do that and basically say, I have something to say here, you just have to be digging deep to figure out what the truth of something is for you. And I feel like 65% of the stuff that I read that's personal has at least some percentage of it that's just a regurgitation of another take I've heard before. And I know what that's like too, because if you're writing and you start to find yourself like using turns of phrase or something like that, that you just know you've read someplace else. I understand why you would do that, because you'd say, well, it worked there. So, but it doesn't. You just have to keep winnowing down to figure out the thing that's unique to you. And you can't do that if you don't accept yourself.
Or know yourself, right? And that just comes back to like the theater school and our college experience of like, how could we have been good actors? I mean, I'm speaking for myself. How could I have been a good actor? I didn't know anything. I wasn't digging deep because I didn't feel safe enough to dig deep. I was 18 years old. And so now we can really dig deep. So I think that's a testament to that. You're really digging deep.
I'm digging deep. And, I probably said on the podcast before, but one of my favorite kind of quotes about art, and I don't even know if it's true, but it's always attributed to Michelangelo. And they asked Michelangelo, how do you sculpt David? And he said, you just take away the parts that aren't David. I think writing is just taking away by the way, I'm not comparing myself to Michelangelo. Just like, it's like an inspiration. Yeah. It's an inspiration. You have on any given subject, you have a million ideas. You just have to cut away all of the ideas that aren't particularly true or necessary or relevant or salient, and just get to the heart of the matter. And writing is rewriting. And I told you I started that in a completely different way. And I had to, I really did spend like quite a few hours on it, because I just kept going back and being like, but that's not exactly what I mean by that. And anyway, so it was great. The great experience was great. I feel I'm getting stronger as a writer. And I love books of essays. Like Roxane Gay is one of my favorite writers. And I think one of these days I'll have enough essays that can be my book. So,
well, you could also, what I thought when I read your blog was that you could also just start submitting your essays to places. So to magazines and anthologies of essays.
Oh,
in the meantime, because that's what a lot of people do. Like, I went to high school and I'm sort of friendly with Samantha Irby, who does the same thing.
Oh,
and yeah. And she like submits to the New York Times. She had this blog that did really well, Bitches Gotta Eat, and it's still doing really well. And that was her foray into a book of essays. But all I'm saying is I'm like at the point where I'm like, don't wait, start submitting the essays.
Okay. All right. And that would never have occurred to me. Okay. I'll do
all kinds of magazines, any magazine. Hey, let me run this by you.
Okay. When you hear people talking about philosophy, or when you were in college or grad school and people were studying philosophy, just generally speaking, how does the concept of studying philosophy sit with you?
I don't know. What comes up for me is I don't know what philosophy is. Like, are we talking Aristotle and all that crap?
Yeah.
Okay. It strikes.
He's one of them. Yeah.
Okay. So it strikes me as, I think at DePaul, I took philosophy and I'm pretty sure I failed or got a D and I had to switch classes. It strikes me as something that I would want to do if I was trapped in prison. I might want to study philosophy. Like, I'm not naturally drawn to that, but I know there are a lot of people that are, but I don't, I feel like it's crazy making a little bit.
Yeah, I don't care for philosophy.
Tell me
I
why.
I don't care about it, and I don't care for it.
Okay.
Now, I will preface this by saying it's probably because, like you, I don't understand it. I vaguely, when people start talking philosophically, I just go like, like my mind is going beep boop beep boop. Beep, boop. But people love it. People love it, and people love to talk about it.
Oh, really?
I mean, this is on Clubhouse. I hear a lot of philosophical conversations, and I kind of think you are interested in that if you're not interested in talking about psychology.
I thought that's where you might be going. I really think that if you don't, yes, I agree. If you don't like talking about feelings, you're going to go to philosophy. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like when people start, and I always, or maybe I will stop trying now, but in the past, I've always tried to like, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. And then I just feel like I'm a balloon floating into the sky. Like, I am not with you. I am not with anything. What is up? What is down? And I guess that's what I think people like that feeling.
Oh
I
my
think that might,
God.
right? Whereas I want the opposite. I want to feel like tethered to the ground. I
Right.
don't want to feel like I'm up in the air at all.
Right.
And so, but interestingly, I think when people are really savvy and they know a lot about philosophy, everybody thinks of them as a genius.
Uh-huh.
But when you're really savvy about feelings, or you know a lot about feelings, I mean, certain people think that, oh, that's good and that's important. But I feel like there's a lot of people who are
like, who cares? Who cares?
The guy in your truck, like, fuck your feelings, right? Like,
fuck your feelings, fuck your safe space, fuck your feelings. There is no safe space or something.
Right.
Take your safe space and shove it up your ass. That's what it was.
Oh, okay. I thought, right. But
it was fuck your feeling. It was both. Oh no, it was both.
Okay.
He had a sign, a homemade sign. It wasn't even just a bumper sticker. It said, fuck your feelings and take your safe space and shove it up your ass, was the entire. So anyway.
So here's the thing. I feel like people who, like, why would you have a bone to pick with feelings? People who say fuck your feelings are people who somebody said fuck your feelings to. And in the same way that I'm not scared by philosophy, I'm just like not interested. I feel like maybe people who love philosophy are sort of, they got there because it wasn't as cool or good or important or safe.
Sure.
You know, right?
Sure.
As talking about, you can't talk about your feelings, so you talk about your thoughts.
Right. So one is the brain and one is the heart, but it's not true. The feelings are all about the brain too, but like that's how they get lumped together.
Right.
And then it gets even further to feelings then are women and thoughts are men. And it gets even more fucked up because then it gets delineated women and the feelings and men and the thoughts. And I think you're right. I think it comes from people are really scared of feelings. Feelings are dangerous and they can lead to trouble. And if you just talk about your thoughts all the time, as a therapist, if you talk about your thoughts all the time, you're safe, quote safe. When I was a therapist, it would drive me crazy when people would intellectualize every single thing and come in and want to talk about their thoughts all the time. And I just kept thinking, this is such a bypass to what's really going on. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have this fantasy of going into one of these clubhouse rooms where they're talking about philosophy and just being like, doesn't matter.
Right.
How do you feel right now? How do you feel about, or not that it doesn't matter, but like, I'm interested to know about how talking about philosophy makes you feel.
Yes.
Right. There must be something that is so, it could be satisfying, but it could also be, maybe it is, and this is here me asking a philosophical question. Maybe it is somehow emotionally healing for people to talk about philosophy. Maybe it's a way, maybe if we really paid attention to it and we felt like we could understand what was happening in these conversations, maybe we would find direct correlation between certain ideas that are discussed in philosophy. We'd be like, oh yeah, that's just whatever.
That's just person-centered, whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
Or like a modality that probably, and also I think that people are just scared.
Yeah, for sure.
It comes down to these like base feelings. I'm scared. The other thing is, to be honest, I don't know the difference. What the hell is the difference? And this is, people are going to be like, oh my God, turn this podcast off. What's the difference between really philosophy and sociology? Sociology is the study. Miles has studied sociology at Northwestern. I don't know what that is. The study of people. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Well, I don't know either, but I'm just going to give my uninformed opinion that I think sociology is more the study of societies and like what happens in society determines, other things. But
that sounds good to me. That sounds good. Like a good definition.
I also feel about the study of philosophy. Listen, people who do it, I'm sure they're really smart, and I'm sure it's great for what it is, but I'm like, what's the point of this? What are we doing here? Like,
it's pontificating.
And
right?
I find that so boring.
Well, I also feel like in a day and age where the pontificating, the time for that is probably over. Looking at our world. I mean, we need philosophers, right? We need them because they're the basis of a lot of things. I'm sure. Whatever. I don't know, but they're important. All philosophers matter, and I'm such an asshole, but I'm just trying to say that I don't know what they do, and I'm sure it's important. But what I feel is, going back to feelings, is that in this day and age where our world is on fire in so many ways, we could sit around while the world is on fire and pontificate about how it got there, or we could try to pick up a bucket like Paul Holmquist is doing, and like put out the fire, help put out.
Yes,
he was a guest we had on a podcast who became a public school teacher, and from an actor. But we could try to put out the fires in whatever way. I'm not saying everyone has to pick up an actual bucket and fucking put out a fire. I'm just saying maybe do something that could contribute to making the world a better place rather than pontificating about it. But they probably would say we are doing something. I don't know, whatever.
They would probably say we're doing something. So this came up for me yesterday, room on Clubhouse that I love. That's the whole premise of it, is that there's old music playing in the background. My people are just shooting the shit, basically. And they started talking yesterday about, I guess, one of the, about NFTs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things about NFTs often is like, people are saying what is it? It's not, how is that art? And you can take a pre-existing piece of art and, like, for example, Banksy burned that picture and now it's worth more. So art is in the eye of the beholder. And somebody was saying, like, well, you could literally take an image of the Mona Lisa and chop it up in certain ways and put it back together and then say, this is my piece of art, which I guess Andy Warhol did that, not with the Mona Lisa necessarily, but like he really explored that idea of like, what is art, and it's all in the eye of the beholder. But the conversation they were having yesterday is who deserves, and they weren't saying legally. This one guy kept saying, I'm not talking about legally. I just mean like philosophically, who deserves to be credited or paid or whatever. And they talked about it for like an hour. And the whole time I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking about a piece of art that I made, then I have an opinion about whether or not I want you to use it. If you're talking about whether I'm going to get sued from using another person's piece of art, then I care about that. But why do I care about it in some theoretical sense? I just don't know what the application. I'm sure there is a beautiful application. I just don't know what it is.
Well, maybe, yeah. And I would feel the same way. And maybe at the core, these people are really, what they really maybe, and now here I am pontificating, but maybe what they really want to say is, I want to be an artist. I want to create art, but I don't have any good ideas. So what happens if I just take the Mona Lisa and I chop it, so they don't personalize, like maybe they want to personalize, but they can't do it. So they talk in these really grandiose terms. And it reminds me of, I keep going back to this image of my mother, actually. So one day we're at a restaurant and it was right after my dad died, and she looked really sad. And I said, "You look really sad." And she slammed her glass down on the table, almost breaking it, and said, "I am not sad. I'm angry." But she was like really sad and angry. Like she couldn't be both, right? And then she stormed out of the restaurant. So all this to say, like she couldn't, a lot of us cannot just say what's actually going on. So like, I'm pissed off. I'm in this room, this clubhouse room, right? Like I'm imagining myself listening to this and it's saying, I want to be an artist, just blurting out in the clubhouse room. We're talking about this philosophically, but wait, I want to be an artist. I want to be paid for my work. That's what's really going on here. That's the heart of the matter. I think you and I want to get to the heart of the matter. And I think people want to stay around the atmosphere of the matter. Right.
And so at the beginning of the conversation, I just said, since he was asking, like, what's everybody's opinion? I just said, I just think the money should go to the artist, like the original artist. I don't, unless it's in the public domain, something that's over 100 years old. I think you're right. I think if I was in charge of that conversation or whatever, I might say the only reason we're talking about this is because we're all trying to figure out whether we, as the artists, can be valued, deserve something, deserve credit. Like, to me, that would have been a fascinating discussion.
Right. But that's why you and I, we're different. And that's why we have this podcast, is kind of because we're saying, wait, let's get to the heart of what the hell happened here, or what is happening here. What is going on here? Taking a hard look at what happened with a psychological lens, because that's a way to eventually maybe heal, or at least move through and then move on, and then be able to live your life and make art and get paid for it and have a good life and all that.
Right.
But like, a lot of people don't give a shit about that.
A lot of people don't give a shit about that. And since you brought up Paul Holmquist, that's the other thing I've been meditating on this week is, that really touched me when he said that he was experiencing actual healing. And that is also something that Rob has said. And we've heard it a few times now. We've heard people say, wow, I am just the process of listening to people talk about their experiences and putting that in the context of my own experiences is making me let go of certain things, or find grace for myself or other people about certain things. And I think in some cases just deal with certain things that people have pushed to the side. And you have been saying, I wanted to give you this credit. You have been saying from the beginning, we are giving a service. We are doing a service. And when you would say that, I'd think, okay, I guess. To me, it just feels like we're doing something that we like and feels fun. But you're totally right. People are receiving it. Not everybody, but some people are receiving it as truly like a gift.
Yeah, it's and I think that is where we're picking up the bucket and putting out the fire, right? Like that is our version of that, and we are like giving, and not, whatever, it is what it is. I'm not trying to say that we're like the world's greatest firemen, but what I'm saying is that at least we're creating something that also has the potential, and people have been saying it is, like your blog and like other things. This is healing for me. Great. Awesome. That way it's actually having an effect in the real world, putting out a fire, or helping people move through a fire. So yay.
Amen. And let the record reflect that if anybody wants to use this content for their own purposes in their art, it must, the dividends must stay with the original creators.
As my client used to say, oh my God, I walked up to this client once and he had this huge tattoo on his neck. And I said, hey, Jesse, what's your tattoo say? And he said, it says, fuck you, pay me. I said, okay, great. Good to know. So in the words of Jesse, fuck you, pay me.
Fuck you, pay me. I love it.
So we have...
Yes, I'm excited. Yeah.
the podcast, we talked to Jimmy McDermott. Jimmy McDermott is an awesome human being. He's a director. He was an actor. He's a consummate artist. He's thoughtful. He's engaging. He's so down to earth and humble, and someone that we just really enjoyed talking to about life, about what it's like to go through hard things, about what gets you through hard things. And it was just a delightful conversation. So please enjoy our conversation with Jimmy McDermott.
A podcast interview was actually called. It was actually before the term existed. So the only other time I've done something like this was an internet radio show. So
Okay. All right. So you're a pro. Congratulations, Jimmy. You survived theater school. And in my mind, you did it with quite a great sense of humor. That's my lasting impression of you, is how funny you are.
Oh, wow. That's I'll take that. That's nice to hear. Yeah.
Now you graduated with a emphasis on directing, but that's not how you started, right?
That's correct. Yeah. I did my first year as an actor in the MFA program.
Okay.
MFA. Okay. So
MFA.
you got your BFA elsewhere.
I did.
Your undergraduate degree elsewhere. What was that?
Yeah. I went Florida Atlantic University, and it was a BFA in acting / directing. You got the directing credit whether you directed anything there or not. I directed a few things there, but actually my directing experience was I worked for a children's theater company where I grew up, and I probably had directed maybe 6 or 7 productions by the time I moved to Chicago through them. And then a couple of one acts through my undergrad. But that was so, I had some experience directing, and I was very interested in directing. But but the criteria DePaul included for the directing programs that I was looking at in my final year of undergrad, they all seemed to require at least 3 productions where all artists were paid. That was kind of like a running theme in it. And I learned quickly after that that's totally a deterrent. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because if I had directed 3 productions where all artists were paid, I'd be well into a career. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it took me, nearly 5 years after directing, after receiving a directing degree from the theater school, to get in that position.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was so those things are it's a bunch of made up stuff.
But when you thought you were going there to the theater school for the acting MFA, I'm just curious about, because the podcast that's airing today has a person who got 2 acting degrees, and I never really got a chance to get to the bottom of why 2 acting degrees. You already knew how to act. Why did you have to go do it at the graduate level?
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. And I somehow knew, or at least I romanticized through professors I had, that even if I did get, and I wanted to be a director. Let's just put that out there. There weren't any illusions about that. But I thought, I as I said before, I was clearly didn't meet whatever criteria it was for a directing program. So either I just head out and try to do that on my own, but I really thought the way into it was going to be through acting. And Joe Manganiello's career was really big at the time. He is somebody who had transferred from being a really big actor on Broadway into a really formidable directing career. So that path seemed like the most natural thing to me. And I always thought, the kind of circuit of writer, director, actor, that identity was really attractive to me. And I always thought that was, I wanted to live a life of letters in sort of that respect. You know what I mean? And so that was all very interesting. And I also knew kind of in the back of my mind that I would never be able to cobble together probably if I devoted myself to theater. And I was also very interested in film. I just had a very stupid way of going about that. And that bore no fruit, clearly, because I was doing it very, very, in a very ill-informed way. But sorry, I'm stammering. But So I knew that I was going to have to teach as a component of that. And so, and the life of a professor was just very cool to me because, they got to do what they wanted most of the time. And, the workload seemed like it was, everything has its administrative bullshit quotient, but but that seemed to be, negligible in that respect. So getting a terminal degree and being able to have like a teaching credit, even if I knew that I wasn't going to be able to cash in on that until much later, it seemed like that was a wise course of action. And I will say, in trying to get another acting degree, I really did kind of boil it down to a couple of schools. It was like Carnegie Mellon, which I didn't have particular interest in. ART, which I didn't really, Boston wasn't a draw for me. Yale, which was number one for me, and then and the theater school in Chicago, because I was born in Chicago and I had extended family. There was a support system there. I liked the city already. I knew that it was in my bones. It was so that was attractive. And then so the final year of my undergrad comes along, and it was a densely packed year. I was really trying to finish, I was really concentrated on that. And I knew I wanted to kind of groom myself for a Yale audition. And I was like, I don't know that I'm going to make that happen this spring. You know what I mean? But DePaul was coming to Miami. I grew up in South Florida, and I went to undergrad there. DePaul was coming to Miami, and I thought, okay, I'll go through the process because I don't want to audition for Yale not having done the graduate audition process yet, And so I said, I'll do that this year, see how it goes, and then try to save up money and really, really concentrate on making that happen next year. So I went to the audition for the theater school, and I did get in, and it was, and then, was faced with the prospect of, okay, do I live in South Florida, which I really, really did not enjoy being there. Do I live here for another year for the prospect of auditioning for Yale and then not get in? Or, so that I didn't really savor that idea. So I decided I'll go check out the theater school and then, see if I like it, and then make this decision. And I went and I visited it, and I fell much more in love with Chicago than I did necessarily the theater school, even though that I didn't really have any complaints about it, other than the fact that when you walked into the building, it was this converted elementary school that was sort of disappointing. Because coming from my undergrad, we were a really pretty well-equipped facility, But the idea of that a city sort of grafting something inside of an existing older structure was charming in its way. I was also like, boy, this is where's the lighting package in any of these rooms? I mean, what the hell,
no lighting package, right?
And yes, I mean, obviously a different facility now,
yeah.
and much, much more, much more competent sort of draw. But so I left from that visit thinking like, well, I really, really want to move to Chicago. Never thinking to my mind that we'll just move to Chicago for God's sakes, and don't incur all of this debt. But I did it because I'd been a lifelong student up at that point. I didn't have a gap year anywhere, you know what I mean? And so just conditioned under the auspices of like, I need to go in the guise of something, you know what I mean? I really felt like I didn't have any safety net or any purpose or any drive or anything to report to unless I was involved in a curriculum of some sort. And that was just because I'd known nothing else since I was 4 years old.
How old were you when you came to DePaul?
It would have been 21.
Okay, so you're still super,
so I was right. I mean,
super young.
Yeah.
But you must have, excuse me, just had a baby face because we both thought you were our same age.
Yeah, I was like, sure, he's 17.
But I was. I was a year older than you probably, Gina, because your last year was my first year, and Boz, you would have been. You were not there my first year. You had come back. So, Oz, you're probably my contemporary. Exactly.
I'm 45. Right? I'm old.
Maybe.
Yeah, she
Okay,
and
I'm a
she
little
and I
closer.
started in the same year, and then she.
But
took
the
a
thing
year
is,
after.
I didn't know any of this about your acting. You never talked about. So like, you must be a fucking good actor. How did I not know this?
Well, you didn't know it because I'm not. So I got cut from the acting program.
Well, that
so
doesn't
it
mean
was,
shit, but
you know,
okay.
well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it was, and it wasn't a huge surprise that I got cut from the acting program because I was not jibing with the acting training there at all. You know, it was really, you know, I mean, not because it was just I couldn't give over to it. I could not give over to laying on the mat. It was there was. And this was, you know, I mean, everybody there was trying to make their living, and I don't deny, you know, I don't begrudge them that, but you know, there was a real kind of like whiff of charlatanism coming from some ends of the faculty that I was just like, I can't believe you have a dental plan, you know what I mean? And it was like and I won't name names because those people were heroes to others. Do you know what I mean? And that's completely legit in their experience, of course. But there were just, you know, pockets of it that I was just like, I don't, you know, I know I'm not really pulling much from this. Do you know what I mean? And it's not like it wasn't a situation where like, maybe I'll use this down the line.
Well, like,
it really was just like, I really feel I'm being, you know, taken through.
okay, so
you know, somebody's magic words. Do you know what I mean?
I feel like
I just didn't like
one man's Jesus is another man or woman's charlatan. So that's to be said.
Absolutely.
And also,
yeah.
Gina has a bit of this sort of, well, I'm going to presume, like, there's this thing about not joining, right? Were you just like, fuck you, I'm not going to join because everyone's joining?
That is I would say that's my most prevailing symptom throughout life. Yes. I cannot use anyone else's hashtag. I cannot, you know, wear anybody else's t-shirt. I just won't do it. I'm biologically averse to it. There's something in me that really needs to create distance when I see 3 people wearing the same jersey. I'm like, get me the fuck out of here.
Okay, so let's try to unpack that a little bit more.
Sure.
Did you remember that since like your earliest memories? In elementary school, you were feeling like there was a crowd that you didn't want to be a part of?
Well, I mean, I think it was mutual for sure. You know, it was, yeah. I mean, I never really, yeah. I mean, you know, I started kindergarten when I was 4, and it was just too young. You know what I mean? Like, so with, you know, speaking of contemporaries, like I never felt like I always felt like everybody else knew something else that I didn't. You know what I mean? So I always had to try to create my own reality or my own thing or my own little lane of whatever it was, because I felt like I didn't get it. You know what I mean? And if I did get it, I didn't want it. It was, yeah. So there's a lot of sour grapes attached to that too, of course, but yeah, that fortified really early.
And when did you first want to pursue acting?
I mean, you know, I think anything I ever wanted to be before I decided that I wanted to be an artist or a storyteller or you know, cut that path at all it was just like I would always identify like the job that I wanted through a television show or a movie. Do you know what I mean? The conduit was always the actor somehow. You know what I mean? It was just like, I love what they're doing. I want to be that. I want to be, you know, I remember actively like in second or third grade thinking like I wanted to be in the CIA because that was the American version of what James Bond did. Do you know what I mean? It was just like when I really wanted to be Roger Moore. It was, you know, it wasn't the job. It was the sequence of events he gets to go through. You know what I mean? So at some point I was just like, okay, now I like playing these things. And, you know, and I was the type of kid that like, I'd go out in my backyard and I would walk around and create movies in my head and sort of act them out in this, like my neighbors thought I was touched, you know, and my dad used to, like, I had this in our backyard. I had this pattern that I walked where I wore out in the grass, And my dad was like beside himself. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with this kid? You know, he's out there flailing his arms and sort of, you know, creating this path in the grass. And the neighbors think we're just, what are we doing with it? He should be institutionalized, you know?
That's awesome.
So,
I love that.
But that's
funny.
when I think about it, that's to me what like directors do. I know a lot of directors I've worked with, they're like pacing and seeing and moving things and doing stuff.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it is. Yeah, I was, you
Directing.
know, honing skill, I suppose, you know, but it was, you know, the just, you know, like my muscles and my mind always took me to like, okay, pretend this, inflate this, blow this up. You know what I mean? Create a world out of this somehow. That was always just fairly instinctive. So that it was, that was, so an idea of like, what can I do that just invites the most sense of play would be and I wasn't good. And then when I finally started doing theater, like probably in middle school to a certain extent, it was the only thing I was ever any good at all. So it really felt like this is the only thing I can pursue because like I was a little bit above average student, but I was, you know, not sort of lazy, but I was like, I no prowess in sports or anything like that. And, you know, and I didn't think of myself as particularly smart. So I was just like, you know, I want to, you know, this feels good. This is fun. I seem to have some kind of knack for it, or at least I have a mimicry property that I've seen somewhere else that I can apply in what I'm doing and get by with that. And that was still fun to me. I didn't feel like I was cheating. I felt like I was drawing on the things that I loved, you know? So, so that was, so yeah, I really fell in love with just the idea of performing, and I always considered acting as just as being a piece of that storytelling. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't taking place in a vacuum for me. It was, I loved the idea of what it takes to bring an audience through a narrative, and how you contribute to that, as you know. And when you're doing children's theater too, you're like you're typically like playing like 5 roles throughout a thing too. So you don't get precious about one particular character or anything like that. Or the process of like really building that character from the ground up is, you know, that's just going to get in the way of what you have to, the task, you know what I mean? So you just have as much fun, you make as much delineation between those things as you can. And you know, and at the end of the day, the kids see a story, you know what I mean? And or, you know, you go in and you try to do the clown routine that's going to get the loudest laugh out of
You're
it,
like
you know? It was a very simple transaction.
The epitome of an ensemble member to me. In a real way, but like you're the one of the only actors that we've talked to that and I know maybe you had dreams, but most people, and myself included, were like, I'm just going to be a famous actor because that's what we're going to.
Well, yeah.
Did you want that?
I mean, I wanted that too. Yeah, sure. Because that, you know, once you start doing that, and then you realize like, okay, what, you know, and the dream for me really always was, and to a certain extent, yeah, the ensemble is an attractive notion of that. But there's also like this great kind of scenery chewing, you know, seizing of a moment too, is that I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. Like that was like, you know, that was, so part of when I was looking at coming to Chicago is that I went to Second City during that visit. And that was just after Adam McKay had wrote the Pinata Full of Bees, which was like a really, really kind of seminal golden era for Second City. He was not in the cast anymore, but like Tina Fey had taken over his role. So I went there and I saw that production. And then when I moved to Chicago, I started working as a busboy there. So I really, because I wanted the proximity to that. But at the same time, I felt like I need to study something in an institution, because that the idea of that degree was still kind of hanging over me, because there was a certain longevity in that pursuit. But what I wanted more than anything to be was like when I was washing dishes backstage, you know, to have somebody come on and say like, Scott Edson's stuck in traffic, you need to get on stage. You know what I mean? It's like, I know the whole show, and I did. I really did. I had that fantasy of just like, I could step into any single one of these roles right now, and they're going to come into the kitchen and they're going to need me, and Lorne Michaels will be in the audience that night, and that will be my thing.
Did you ever get to, I mean, I'm guessing that nobody ever came and got you from your dishwashing and brought you on stage.
They didn't. Strangely, there was a very deep bench of hungry performers who had been improvising for decades that were in line.
Inexplicably more qualified than you. But did you have a chance to hang out socially with any of the performers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a little bit. I mean, like, I wouldn't say that I was, particularly friends with them, but it was, but yeah, I got, yeah. I mean, you'd say hello. You'd say, you'd ask them how the show was going. You'd say, like, this thing that you're improvising towards a sketch tonight was really strong tonight. I hope that makes it into the next review. I loved talking to them about what they were doing, and they liked to talk about it too, because they were in the middle of writing something, you know what I mean? Or kind of adapting something, crafting something from the improv sets to make it into the next thing. And, I mean, some of the people who are not like really famous, who were kind of the nicest to me, or like would talk to me the most frequently. I mean, it was the funniest person in the world that I ever saw on stage there was Brian Stack, and he's a head writer for Colbert now, I think. And he was, yeah, he made it a point to make sure that he was on a first name basis with everybody on the staff, no matter what you do. He'd check in with you, but not in a way where, but in a completely, totally genuine way. It was not perfunctory, wasn't necessarily even small talk. He would just ask you an interesting question about your life. Or like Horatio Sands, like would come back, and he noticed that I was like sad one day, and he's like, "You got lady problems?" I was like, "Yeah, I actually do right now." So you're really, really good to pick up on that.
That's so cute. So getting back to this thing about not wanting to buy what they were trying to sell you in terms of, how did you say? You said like there were certain phrases that the teachers were saying at the theater school that you weren't.
I think it's the magic words. I mean,
Okay.
I really think that conservatory training, it really is about like, what are the buzzwords of that 5-year pocket? Do you know what I mean? Because I've noticed that I worked, because I did get to work at the theater school as like a guest artist, directing like workshops and studio things in subsequent years. And I would realize that and I had one very good experience and one experience which was unfortunate, and it was, and I have to take responsibility for it, because I was not the adult in the room I needed to be the entire time. Nothing untoward happened or anything like that, but I was, I mean, blurring the lines, because these people feel like, even though you have 15 years between you or something like that, it's easy to get back into an environment like that and feel like these people are your contemporaries, and just learning that you absolutely have to create this brick wall there on so many in so many aspects of that relationship is important. And that was hurt. It hurt to learn that, and it was, it cost me an opportunity, because it just didn't go well. And it was weird, because I couldn't, I was reading the room very poorly. I didn't have any idea that was necessarily going on, but it was very clear that when they left the room, I was the topic of conversation, and it was, and it wasn't good. That was a bit of a rude awakening, and it was so, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was just not using the same vocabulary as the instructors they currently had. My approach wasn't, it wasn't concentrating on whatever the kind of de jour technique that was taking place there. And I think it had mostly to do with language, because there was a complaint. The most misrepresented complaint in the evaluations was that I wasn't ever talking about character or intention. I was like, that's bullshit. I'm just not giving you, I'm just not phrasing it the way you're used to hearing, or we are getting at it through how we're exploring the the physical reality of what we're staging here now, you know. And also, I'm in room 302, thrust with some 19-year-olds that I have to figure out where they fit in this big play. Do you know what I mean? And while the cut system was not in effect by that point, there was still this really strangely, this prevailing anxiety of just being 19 in a conservatory that was as much anxiety as it was if the stakes were they were going to be cut, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
It was almost like that was the most interesting thing to me. It was like it getting rid of the cut system didn't seem to relax the psyche at all of these kids. It just, you know, I think that was cynically probably just because the lawsuits had mounted too far.
Right,
you know,
right.
at that point.
So,
and I do think that there's something more humane about promising somebody that you're going to take them through a training institution that they've invested in at a certain point. Although there are certainly people in all of those experiences that I looked at in both of my experiences teaching there, and some of my both of my experiences directing there, and then some of my experiences teaching there, because I did teach a lecture class there for a couple of years too. But was that, you know, there were sadly there were some people that was like, yeah, you would have really benefited by being cut in your first year, because you can't do this. Right. I'm not going to raise the Titanic here in the 4 weeks we have. This isn't going to happen, you know? So,
that's very interesting. This whole thing about going back literally to the same school and having to do, I mean, I had forgotten until just this moment that I left college and I moved to California, and then I moved back to Chicago some 7 years later. And I was so excited to be back. I wanted to go, I wasn't excited to be back in Chicago. I wanted to go back to Movement to Music. I loved Movement to Music so much. And I knew that John let people, you know, graduates come in.
Yes. Yeah.
But I see it now that what happened to me was that I hadn't done any of the processing of my experience. So I kind of just went back and then like felt all of the same unresolved things that I had been feeling when I was there. And it led to this disgusting like posturing on my part. Yeah. And I was this is all coming back to me. I was like trying to do this thing of like, I really get you. And everybody's like, I've literally never laid eyes on you. What the fuck are you talking about? But because I hadn't begun to look at this whole segment of my life.
True. It's I have a lot of harmonic recognition in what you're saying there. Yes, absolutely. It is strange what environments can do to you when you return to them. You know what I mean? What it pulls out of you on like the cellular level, and it is weird. And I'm not a superstitious person at all, like in really much of any way. However, like there were room, like I may be getting the room number wrong, but like 302 was a room that I had been assigned to several times. It was like every class I had in that room was a class I didn't like. Every rehearsal experience I had in that room was an experience that I thought was not strong. And then I was back in this room again, which I knew I hated. And I thought, well, that was forever ago. And it really did it. But the room made me feel like it was like just something wasn't
right. I have that.
Something wasn't right. You know what I mean?
I've had that too.
It's so weird. It's so weird. And you know, and it's really tempting to like blame the room and not my behavior. You know what I mean? But it's, but I guess that's how we cope.
Well, I have to say the only other room that was mentioned, the only other time somebody mentioned a room number was Tate, and he did say room 302. Yep. So there is something about it. And I remember that it's
the room 237 of the theater school.
Wait, what's 237?
From The Shining.
Oh, right, got it. My worst acting experience was also in that room. Now that I'm thinking of it, that's very funny.
What was that?
Orgasmo Adulto escapes from the zoo. It was
Hello.
Yeah.
Wait, I remember. Wait. Yes, I think I remember that. Weren't you the lead in that? And you were the
yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
It was horrible.
You were Orgasmo Odelta?
I was the woman who, whatever, leaning out my window talking for hours. I felt like it was the ring cycle. I felt I was there for 8 hours at a time. It was horrible.
Doing the ring cycle in room 302.
That's my name of my new solo show.
I wish that had been my thesis.
That's my new solo show. It's going to be called The Ring Cycle.
Ring cycle in room 302.
But wait,
did you have that? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, did you ever have that, like returning to the theater school and feeling like you were your younger self?
I teach BFA 4s, but only since last year, and it's all online. And so it's something about the building. I'm telling you right now, I had to go to the building for a meeting, right? The new building. I've never been in the new building. And I immediately felt like, oh my God, who are the cool people? Where are the pretty ones? Where are the ugly ones? I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is horrible. So I feel the same thing.
It is.
And if I was I am so grateful that I'm teaching online, because it's a totally different thing than being in. Yeah. And you can't even.
There's no scene.
Right. There's no scene, and there's also no way of like doing the harm you can do when you're in a room with somebody.
I don't know about that, but it's much diminished.
Right. It's diminished. The energy can't be misconstrued in that specific way of like a physical weirdness, or like,
yes. Or the proximity, or just like he's breathing too loud, too near,
or like,
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just the weirdness. My weirdness gets kind of like there's a filter. So that's good. So anyway, I remember going back after I had booked a TV show right after and feeling what I wanted was every teater to come out and say, we're so sorry we didn't treat you better. Right. We're so sorry that we didn't cast you as the lead in every and none of that happened. It was like maybe John Bridges was like, yeah, you have too much makeup on. See you later. And I was like, oh God. Yes. So they never give you what you really want.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say that that's unique to the theater school at DePaul per se, but it's done in a very incubated, concentrated way where you feel it in a really kind of acute fashion for sure.
So yes, go ahead. No, go ahead, Beans.
You got cut from the acting program, and did they suggest? I mean, I knew you say you already knew you wanted to be a director. So was that just the natural thing, or did they offer it to you? How does that work?
Yeah, it was in the same letter that they cut me in a subordinate paragraph. They said, but you can continue on as an MFA director. However, the stipulation was that I had to join the existing class because there were only 3 directors for any given year at that time. I don't know if it's different now, but and the class below me was full. They had 3 directors for that. And the class that I was in, the class of 99, had 2 directors, but right before school had started that year, the 3rd one had dropped out. So there was a vacancy in that class. So the deal was that I had to finish the curriculum with those 2, but I had to do the 3 years of the directing program in my remaining 2 years. However, a couple of the core classes, like maybe 1 or 2 of them, were things that I had taken as the actor already. So there was a bit of a hybridization there. But it wasn't like you can take your time and finish this whenever you want. They're like, you gotta go with these guys. Although weirdly, I was the only person in that class to actually walk at the graduation ceremony.
Why?
Because I was the only person who finished my thesis.
Oh wow!
Paper.
Wow.
Anyway. Yeah.
Wow. So what happened when you graduated? What'd you do next?
I tried to survive. Nobody wants a 24-year-old kid with a theater, like an MFA in directing, like not even in the theater. Nobody's interested in you. You know what I mean? And I knew that. I was steeled for that. I didn't have real illusions about that. And, like rewinding even the decision about like, am I going to go into this directing program after being cut from this thing was one I had to make, because part of me was just like thinking like, you know what? I mean, in this past year, it's not that I didn't learn anything from the acting program at the theater school. I did. I would be lying if I said that I didn't. But I learned more about what I really wanted to do while I was washing dishes at Second City. Do you know? So I was just like, do I just go that path? Because that was the thing that seemed to make the most sense to me in this past fiscal year, you know? So how do I approach this? And then ultimately, there was some scholarship money involved with the offer of the directing program. And I was just like already like, well, I put the year in. I know the people. My friends are good actors, and I want to work with them in a certain capacity. And I think I've been watching plays in that goddamn building for a year too. And you know, and I have the sense of like, you know what, this might be nifty. Do you know what I mean? Or like, this is a workaround for this, or this is a way to address the fact that we're in a classroom, you know, watching a play that doesn't belong in here. You know what I mean? Like, so it was, so those challenges became interesting to me. And Jim Alselhoff, who was my acting teacher in that first year and the head of the directing program too, I had a rapport with him in some way. And he and I talked on several occasions throughout that first year where he would ask, do you think you're more of a director? And I was like, well, yes, absolutely I am. And he's like, well, why are you in the acting program? I was just like, because I can't get into your program as a director. What the hell? You know what I mean? And he was just like, well, yeah, I don't read all of that stuff. I was like, well, you're telling me that now, you know? And it was, so that was a bit of a strange conversation, but I thought, you know, I had a lot of my eggs were already in that basket. So it was like, yeah, let's see this through, because I don't really have any other prospects. If I go the Second City route, it's not like I'm returning to anything that, like, you know, I would have to start at ground level, go through all of that training, not only do Second City, I'd have to do EIO, I'd have to do Annoyance, because everybody who was on the stage there had been studying improv for 10 years with Mick Napier, with Del Close, with all, you know, all of those kind of heavyweights, really. And you got to get inside of that scene, you know what I mean? So it really was about, like, do I trade one scene for another, you know? And I had made some really good friends at theater school by that point. Although I was not close with my classmates until really the last couple of months of that first year, you know, because I had been, yeah, I don't know. I tried to work as much as I could, even just, you know, at Second City, because I wanted to make money for the time that you were in the casting pool and you couldn't work anymore. And then you were, and it was just like that was my social life at that time. The people I worked with there and the people I looked up to there, that was like, yeah, I want to be around. I'll go to work tonight so I can watch Rachel Dratch and Tina Fey do their little you know, they were honing those Boston characters that they did, you know, the you are people, you know, it was like watching them give birth to that. So that was really exciting, you know, and you had a sense there working there that at that time that it was like, this is like a gold, the people on these stages right now are going to be this next generation of comic sensibility in the United States. And they totally were, you know what I mean? That was no surprise to me when they became kind of the, you know, the great voices of our time. Or, you know, great is relative, I suppose, but like, you know, the most powerful comic voices.
Do they have, so I guess we've had two other directors on here, but I can't remember if we've asked them. Buzz, tell me if I'm wrong. They don't have some equivalent of the showcase for directors, some way that they're kind of...
Well, your thesis production was supposed to be that because, so that was it, but nobody came to see it, so it didn't matter.
Oh my God.
Right. Like, I mean, how is that comparable? Did they invite anybody to come see it? Or?
Well, you know, this was an education actually. When I listened to your interview with Allison Zell, who mentioned that Jim Alselhoff fought to get the thesis productions off campus and like into the Victory Gardens Theater. And the year that I did it, we were at the Athenaeum Theater. So him taking it off campus and at least creating the potential for somebody to see it in a true theater space in Chicago. I didn't realize he had fought for that. And so that was a bigger deal. And so that actually, he was my assessment of him was that he was kind of checked out when I got there, and years later, I mounted that I was really he was much more checked out than I thought. But I was pleased to learn that the year prior to me coming there, he at least fought for something like that.
What was your thesis project, Jimmy?
An unmitigated disaster. No, it was called Slaughter City. It was a play by Naomi Wallace, and it was it was, I did everything very poorly and very wrong in it, and it was so it was really hard. My context, though, my dad got sick in the beginning of 1998 and died in November 98, and then the thesis, I started my rehearsals for my thesis on like January 2nd, and it was pretty much a lost cause, although like I was fighting through it. I was getting up every day and doing it, but like in this very sluggish way. And the day I got back to Chicago in 99, there was this blizzard that was like really, honest to God, like 4 feet of snow, and it didn't melt the entire winter, So it was as harsh as you could possibly think. Do you know what I mean? Just the whole experience of those months, the rehearsal period leading up to that production, were just, physical conditions were hard, and I don't even know if I would say this biggest mess that I've ever been in my life, because I was a 23, 24-year-old kid, and I had not dealt with my dad's illness nor his death at all. And so I was carrying a lot of unprocessed stuff, and that obviously, brought itself out in self-flagellation and anger. And I had an actor in that production that was going through something herself. And it got to a point where I was just like, your grief is nowhere near as exquisite as mine, and I am going to take this out on you right now, because I don't believe what you're suffering could be possibly any different than I am. And I'm coming prepared, and I keep showing up, and I know what I'm doing, and it was, and I knew better than to, do grief comparisons or suffering comparisons or anything like that. But I chose, in my righteous anger, to to say, I'm going to make, and now I'm creating a toxic relationship with somebody that I need to deliver for me, and it was really shitty. And the product manifested itself exactly how you would think, because that's what it looked like, and it was, it was a rough time. And, and I had classmates that said to me, it was like, dude, take a year off. Do you know what I mean? Or ask if you could do your thesis in the spring instead, because you're not going to be able to do this. And I was, and that was just, that cemented in me. It was like, no, I fucking got to do this. My dad would roll over in his grave if I didn't do this. Those were the justifications, but I was just in no shape to see the biggest project that I had in my career as a student there. I was in no shape to see that through. And it suffered greatly. It was, I mean, it had a face. There were good moments. There were really strong performances in it, despite a lot of the stuff that I was very unhelpful with. But it was, it was a mess. And one of the only reasons, the reason that I probably finished writing the thesis paper and was the only one in my class to do it, because I was just like, I have to exorcise this, exorcise this, and so, yeah. Wow. So, yeah, luckily I did one last production, in a movement room there, that I thought was my strongest work there. So that it did feel like it ended on something that was, hopeful, but that was a very dark winter, and in my life, in that year, in the experience of being an artist, and in my kind of pursuit of that degree.
Wow. but you obviously directed after that. So you graduated and you said nobody wanted to.
I did, but I didn't direct anything for probably nearly 3 years after that. I had to, and this was the other thing too. Like the only way I kind of got back into theater was both through acting and scenic design, because people always needed a dude in their play. You know what I mean? And so I was like, yeah, I'll play a small role in this. And it was, just these storefront theater companies, and one in particular called the Side Project that I did a lot of work with for a long time, where, you go in as an actor and you just start to develop a relationship with the artistic director, and you say, look, listen, this is what I really do, and actually I found the scenic design elements a kind of a stronger way into directing, because you're kind of creating the reality of the piece. You're creating the world of the piece. Do you know what I mean? So people would see your mind working much more in that way than they would you showing up to play a bit role in something, So yeah, but I wasn't a trained scenic designer. I couldn't draft anything. I just had ideas of like, and I wasn't a carpenter either, but I was like, I could build this, I could assemble this. And that's our concept.
It's very spare. It's very open, very deconstructed.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, but that's what they could afford anyway. Right. So it didn't really matter.
So we obviously talk about the things that actually help people to survive their theater school experience, and you having to grapple with a major loss. It sounds like the way that you kind of did the white knuckling your way through it version of survival.
Very much.
But is there anything else you can point to as something that helped you survive? I was going to think it was your peers, but you said you had kind of not really connected with all of them necessarily until the last couple of months.
No, that was in the first year. By the time I was in my third year, absolutely. Really, really, really very close friends. Shayna Firm is one of my best friends in the world, and she was very, she didn't literally hold my hand through like that experience, but I knew I could always count on her, and Jason Denizek and Chris Schultz, Kelly Holden, Kelly Ogden. Those were the people in my life for sure. And so yeah, they were great. I did. Yeah. By the time I was in my third year, I was completely in the incubator of the theater school. That was, but it was a weird experience, because most of, to have friends, my core group of friends were mostly undergrad actors, even though I was friends with the guys in the MFA class too. But I lived with undergrad folks when I first moved there too. So, that was, and they were all in the undergrad. We lived in an apartment that was, apart from Tom Lemaire's coach house thing that he lived in, was the closest apartment and the biggest closest apartment to the campus. So between classes, no matter what, everybody who was in the class of 99 was in our house all of the time. Everybody. So it was so it really was just, it was like a stopgap. Is where you went between classes, you know what I mean? And it was so you were never alone ever in that house. Exponentially an exponent of your roommates, I guess I should say.
Right.
So that was, and even when I had moved out of that house, I was there more often than I was at the apartment, the studio apartment I lived in. So my friends and the people I trusted were the only thing that got me through it. Although I did elect to spend a lot of that time alone too, because it was, it was just, everything felt as messy as it possibly could. And, to a certain extent, you were like, I want to spare everyone else this just, anger and frustration. And it wasn't even like I would wake up crying or anything like that. It wasn't, and another thing that helped, and this is a very weird thing, but I do remember it. There was an album with one track on it that I would listen to every morning, because every morning I woke up and I was just like, I'd rather be dead. But I'd play this one song and it would, inexplicable reasons would be the thing that would say, okay, soldier on again today. So that was that.
What was
Actually,
the song?
It's a very, very, very obscure thing by the moniker that he went under. This was called Barry Black, but he's a songwriter called Eric Bachman. He wrote for art. He was the frontman for Archers of Loaf, and Crooked Fingers was his kind of solo project after that. But he's also done albums under Eric Bachman. But this one was called Barry Black. Was a side project of his when he was in Archers of Loaf. It was a song called Golden Throat.
Wow.
And for the lyric content doesn't have anything to do with that time or anything, but it was just something about the tenor of his voice, the march of the song. And it was one of those songs on an album that led into another song that was just this kind of like punk fight song, but with horns. So it was like listening to those two songs, and it was in the middle of the album. So I just had to go to those two tracks. So I'd listen to that song and then it would bleed into the other thing. And the other thing was the thing that just made me feel like I could, that like physically got me to my feet. So
I love that. I love that. I lived in an apartment in Chicago where my next door neighbor played the song "I Will Always Love You" every day, all day, yes. all the time, for months.
Yes.
Presumably she was working through a breakup. And
or her bodyguard had just been
Could have been. She could have been deep into it with Kevin Costner. But I love that song, and I really appreciated that she was going through something.
Yes.
But it is something about, that I totally know what you're talking about. I can't think of a song I've done that with, but I know I've done that, and it's the repetition, and it becomes like the way that you sort of prep yourself for facing your next emotional journey.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had anything quite like that since or anything like that, but that's kind of why it particularly sticks out in my mind, because it became the ritual. It became like, I was like, this was.
I have a question.
I don't know what the alchemy is there, but it is.
My question is, are you going to direct again?
Probably not. No.
Oh, really? Why not?
No. I haven't done anything for a very long time, actually. And so, I haven't really. Yeah, no,
no.
I mean, it's over. Let's just say
it's over. You don't want to do it anymore?
I don't know what is on the other side of this, frankly. You know what I mean? And I also know, for very good reasons, the professional landscape is going to change, and I don't solve anybody's PR problems in that respect. So, and I've been I'm 5 years out of having directed anything professionally. No, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the medium is going to be. And I'm not sour grapesing that at all. I think it's and I don't, I don't live in the city anymore. Actually, I live about an hour outside of the city. So, I'm not part of like the geographic community really anymore. And I don't know. I feel pretty outmoded as an artist, quite frankly, and as a theater artist. Anyway.
That may be, but like one thing I've learned in these last 5 years is you can ignore it for a time, and pretty soon it's going to come knocking on your door. So how are you going to get your artistic needs met if you're not directing?
I think I'd have to. I'm really lazy about it, but I think if I'm doing anything, it's going to be about just kind of re-entering short film and making that, and like there's no career path in that for me either. It's just that's where I think I'd have to do it, and I like making film a lot. I haven't done very much of it, but but I like it, and I think I have a knack for that vocabulary.
So maybe you'll direct our.
I was gonna say.
We're gonna film the teaser of our pilot. So maybe you'll be our director.
That's sold.
I mean, here's the thing. I still talk about Jimmy McDermott as my favorite theater director, and people are like, they remember you.
Who's that?
No, they remember you. I'm like, you guys, Jimmy McDermott, my favorite theater director.
Sweet.
And people are like, what happened to that guy? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm telling you right now,
exactly.
He's a brilliant.
He's asking himself the same question. I mean, I was the associate artistic director of an equity theater for a couple of years too. And, so I lived that life, to a certain extent. And it was still really, really hard to get work. It's the balance of like, if you commit yourself to an institution, you're not available to freelance in the way that you build the resume that's really exciting to people. And then when you get out and freelance, you're hustling constantly for work. And then I had a very small child, which was one of the reasons I stopped working in an institution, because it was like these 16-hour days on the are not going to jibe with bath time. You know what I mean? So it's like and I wanted to be a part of this kid's life for sure. And I found parenting and trying to direct for theater in the model that we participate in to be really incongruent. And although I did it for a while, for sure, but it was about just chasing everything down. And the only things that were kind of worth pursuing after a while were gigs in academic institutions, because they paid not particularly well, but they, you could at least look at your time and say, oh, I'm making more than $3 an hour.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
And so it did really become a matter of just like, look at the fucking spreadsheet, you know what I mean? And this is not yielding dividends. And the thing about a Chicago theater career, and I've heard this said before, is that like, you have to arrive about 6 or 7 times before you arrive. And even when you've arrived, you're still hustling just on a different level, And I had arrived maybe 5 of those 7 times, and I was tapped out, because it did get to a point where it was, and I would never throw this at my wife's feet, but you have a partner at home that's like wondering, when is this going to pay off? Do you know what I mean? And I didn't have a clear answer for her, and it was deeply unfair for me to try to carry her along in that narrative. And I had to start really opening myself up to other realities. And I'm saying this like, oh yeah, one day I thought this was a painfully, excruciating, years long extractive process, and and I still don't feel great about it necessarily, but I like my life a lot. I am very glad that whatever career pursuits I made didn't jeopardize my family unit ultimately. And so I'll take that, you know what I mean? And that's about it. And I have had an opportunity the past couple of years to direct some things like at a community type level that were not plays, but like performance-ish, more or less kind of almost like, like staged concerts and things like that. And they've been fun and really fulfilling on their level. And one of the actors I worked on with that was like one of the greatest actors I've ever worked with in my life. And he's a lawyer, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just like, but he was like, you were so damn good. I can't like, no notes, man. That's great. Wow. It's but even when you are equipped with everything you need to make a production happen, it's still the hardest thing in the world. And to electively say, I'm going to do it on a level that's not equipped, where everything needs a certain a degree of rehabilitation in order to like hit the stage. I'm just not up for that amount of work and
Yeah.
inevitable disappointment.
Understood. And I know we have to end soon, but Boz, can you just tell people about your experience with Jimmy, since I don't think you've told that story on here?
My experience is this, that it was a subtle interplay between, yes, well, I happen to love people that refuse to join things. I think that they are, because I wish I could.
I think that's what connected me with you too. That and your the first conversation you and I had was about
pornography.
The scene from a porno movie you had seen.
So I just think that there was a quiet way that you have of getting actors to be in the moment that is not abusive and not in your face, and yet you still get there, and the way your mind works is a very meticulous without being precious. That's what I'll say. And I so appreciate that.
Thank you. That's really great to hear. That's interesting. Because I mean, I think people interpret. I don't know about abuse as the term necessarily, but people interpret. People draw different boundaries. Let's just simply say that. The unfortunate experience I had working at the theater school was such that I think I always knew this because I had an experience in undergrad where I saw this go a little sideways a couple times, where the instructor was trying to get someone out of something by asking them to use an experience from their own lives, And it was just like always, well, you got tears out of this person, but does that thing that you just made them do have legs in a production? Do you know what I mean? Is this repeatable? Is this just re-traumatizing someone? Do you know what I mean? And I found I never wanted to work that way because it was none of my business. I'm not a licensed anything. And, and I don't want to have a situation on my hands that I wish I didn't open that genie.
Right. And I think,
So something that I have used in the past, and I don't think I was using this when I was a student at the theater school so much, but something that I kind of continued to use afterwards was that, I don't want to ask you about your experience. This isn't a therapy session, but if we're not getting somewhere in a scene, I'll say, look, something analogous to this scene happened to me. And it's a very unattractive thing that I did and said in a way that I behaved, and a set of circumstances or an ultimatum that I gave somebody. And it was that dire, and it's one of the most shameful experiences of my life, but that's what happened. And that's what this scene is. And if you're doing anything less than that, we don't have the motor of this thing, And that was very unappreciated by the theater school students.
I can see that. I can see that.
And they thought that he shouldn't be he shouldn't be, using this as a therapy session. And I think that's right. But at the same time, it's like,
something. You got to have something.
You know what? And what you're not telling in the part of the story is that as soon as I shared that, the scene was great. You actually delivered.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So even when you're trying to avoid an abusive situation, or you're drawing a boundary or respecting a boundary, or it can be interpreted as an infringement, and you just have to be really careful with that. And that's another reason why I think even after that, I thought, even after that directing experience, I always felt like I walked away with that. And the thing that I learned from the litany of mistakes I made on that was also I think I also had to surrender something that was really vital too, which kind of plays into why pursue this if we're, and particularly if, if when theater reestablishes itself, there's going to be, given the last several years, there's going to be so many things in place and so many things that people are watching for. Do you know what I mean? That when, I think a theater, any experience, any collective artistic experience should have a sense of safety and trust among the people. But we all pursued this in some way because there was something dangerous about it too,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
And don't know how to reconcile those two things. And it's part of the reason that I feel like when I say outmoded, I was like, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to go back into it. Do you know?
I get
Other
it.
than just trying to tell the story as clearly as you can. So to a certain extent, I have this kind of relief that like, I feel like I don't have to go back and try to navigate that, because I feel like I would fail a lot.
Yeah. Well, look for our phone call in 2022 when we're making the pilot of Kiki and we need your expert opinion.
Well, I love
If you liked what you heard today, please give us a positive 5-star review and subscribe and tell your friends. I Survived Theater School is an Undeniable Inc. production. Jen Bosworth Ramirez and Gina Polici are the co-hosts. This episode was produced, edited, and sound mixed by Gina Polici. For more information about this podcast or other goings-on of Undeniable Inc., please visit our website at undeniablewriters.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.